Welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry, licensed clinical psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. And today we are going to be covering Jennifer and James Crumbley, their sentencing. And this stream is from Court TV. I did plan to use Surviving the Survivor, did a phenomenal job covering it. And I do have a link to their channel down in the description. They had a lawyer on that was providing commentary. So, and then I know Peter has covered it. And then also, I'm sure some other lawyers that you all follow will be covering it as well. Welcome to everyone. If you don't mind, just going ahead and clicking that like button if you're a regular here, and we are going to hop right into this. Trigger warning. So I am going to start with the impact statements first, and the survivors of Ethan Crumbley is the individual who had the weapon. He's the one that carried out the actual act. His parents were found guilty of, I want to say, involuntary manslaughter because of their negligence, because they did not secure the weapon. They specifically purchased it. They did not let the school know that they had this. And there were all of these things. And I know a lot of people have thoughts about, the parents being held accountable for what some people might have never seen. And I do, because uncivil law brought up a really great point, and I'm going to cover that once we get through the sentencing. Okay. So once again, I am going to start with those impact statements, and I'll be monitoring the chat. And so if you all have questions as I go, and I will be pausing it along the way. So let's first start out. They start out with like disagreeing about, so they checked substance abuse and alcohol and THC. They had checked certain things off for Mr. Crumbley, and then also they had checked things for Jennifer, and it was based. So the lawyers are kind of arguing things in the pre-sentencing report, because most judges use that pre-sentencing report to base the amount of time that they're going to use. And there were, I think it might have been like almost 2 hours. Like it was a lot of time devoted to them, disagreeing over some of the things that were in that pre-sentencing report. And based on the judge's reaction, none of that really even mattered, because the judge went above what that report recommended. And so I am going to skip this front. So all of this is just back and forth over things. Um, a lot of people have thoughts on Jennifer Crumbley's lawyer, and I get it, because I think James's lawyer does a better job arguing the law. And Shannon, that's Jennifer's lawyer, she talks on her website about aggressively fighting for her clients. And you can see her do that. In this case, I don't know how helpful it was. And the reason why I say that is because, and I mentioned this in another video that I did, specifically covering Jennifer's case, I thought her lawyer came off as unlikable, and like she was like, it didn't come off well to me, and I don't think it went over well with the jury either. But so we are going to get to the first impact statement. These are all incredibly powerful. So if you need to come back in about like 20 minutes, like please, I do not mind. But I do want to play through these first before we get to James's statement, and then also Jennifer's statement as well. And each of their lawyers, advocate for their client as well. The prosecution is going to have some statements, and then the judge is going to come back, and we'll get into it.
I would like to start with the person that matters the most. Madison, she was a kind soul. She always had a smile on her face. She lit up the room when she walked in. Her laugh I could listen to all day. It was infectious. Her big sister skills were undeniable, and she took that role very seriously. Madison was smart, funny, loving, passionate, determined, and genuine. Her expectations were high, and at times we needed to let her fall. She needed to be reminded that not everything is perfect, even if she wanted it to be. Madison had an influence that most never achieved. Sometimes I would listen to a poem she wrote or watched her create art with no tracing, just pure talent. She would talk about college and what majors she would like to do and what would be most helpful to society. The passion that she had for everything and everyone was remarkable. I would catch myself watching her and thinking to myself, how lucky am I? I'm the one that gets to be her mom. What did I do to deserve a perfect person? She will be the best thing to ever happen to me at such a young age myself. I grew up because of her. We grew together. I learned from her. I mattered because of her. From the moment she was born, I promised myself that I would be there no matter what. Through the falls, heartbreak, letdowns, and struggles, I would be there. I would listen, learn, and love every moment. I wouldn't miss a thing. I would always protect her. On November 30th, 2021, exactly 17 years, 6 months, and 13 days made me break my first promise, and it will hurt for eternity. As her mom, I didn't protect her. First, I'd like to say thank you to the prosecution team. I say thank you to you all. Saying thank you really doesn't seem enough anymore. The countless hours you've worked, the time away from your family, and always taking our feelings into consideration. Karen and Mark, the work you've put into getting all the facts, speaking to us like we matter, and never wavering from your goal. It speaks volumes of the people you are, and I'm proud to call you a part of Madison's voice. Advocates and Jen, I'm not sure where to start. You've all seen me hit points in this tragedy that some days I wasn't sure who I was. One minute I'm laughing, next I'm crying, and sometimes I'm just silent. Either way, one thing stayed consistent. You always listened. Jen, you're not just a friend, you are family. My mind keeps going back to something during the trials. Something that is almost on repeat like a broken record. It's something as a mother I can't understand. And honestly, I don't think any mother would understand. It was when Jennifer said it wouldn't do anything different.
And that's where I wonder if Jennifer's lawyer didn't prepare her that she was going to ask that question and what her response might be. And Jennifer is going to try to explain. Even in the pre sentencing report, she has provided information that she was misunderstood, this and that. But the way that she still says it to this day is with hindsight. Knowing what I know now, I would do things different. But even with that, to me, I just ugh, it comes across a bit disconnected from what these parents are grieving and from what they're all going through. And the fact that they as parents, they are going to fight. So the judge has not yet ruled on whether James and Jennifer can have contact with one another and whether they can have contact with Ethan. Right now, they are unable since 2021, November 30th, 2021 was the last time that they had contact with him. And the judge has not ruled yet because they are because they were arguing the fact that they aren't co-defendants, but their crime is connected to his crime, and, there are certain protections in place when there are situations like that, and to me, I her statement, and when she gets to the part about forgiveness, I'm gonna try to not pull every single piece of my hair out because, like, there are things that she said that it's just, it just comes across just, oh, it's disconnected is the best word that I have in this moment. Like, it just comes across empty. It just comes across void. And she's going to still fight that she's a good mom, and to say all those things in front of those grieving parents, to me, I don't know how she can do that. Um, I agree. There's nothing that she could have done, that this mother could have done to protect her child. And that is one of the hardest things that every parent has to acknowledge, is that I cannot protect my child from everything. I just can't. And I do hope that this mom, that she does um forgive herself. She didn't do anything wrong. She sent her daughter to school. That is what she did. She sent her daughter to school, and we should all be able to send our kids to school without this fear. And it blows my mind, and I was saying it, I haven't said it on social media yet, but I was saying it to like family and friends. People are freaking out over the eclipse and eclipse glasses, and one of our local school districts, they actually, parents could have like not sent their kid to school if the parent was concerned about the eclipse. And and yet we have, intruder drills are a norm. My 6-year-old knows what he's supposed to do if there is an intruder, if the school goes on lockdown, if there is an active shooter. And it's just really sad that like that's the norm, that we're all like, "Oh, we're all okay with that." But like we are freaking out over eclipse glasses. Like that was my little pet peeve this week, but it's all right. My kiddo enjoyed the eclipse. He kept his glasses on, and everything was fine. Um,
I'm putting a little emphasis on different, as I know life throws us things that are out of our control. But life takes turns and eventually puts them back in our control, like giving you a hint when something needs to change. I want to compare a few things to see through my perspective, as I know things are different about the events and how we see them from the events on November 30th. While your son was hearing voices and asking for help, I was helping Madison pick out her senior classes. While you were purchasing a gun for your son and leaving it unlocked, I was helping her finish her college essays. While you dropped him off at school, upset that he was failing class, I texted Madison, "Drive safe, it's slick outside, have a good day." When you got a call to me at the school about your son and how it interfered with your day, I was rearranging my schedule so I could take Madison to get her oil changed for the first time. When you left without hesitation and not taking him home, I was worried if she'd be okay driving in the first snowfall of the season and if she brought a coat. When you walked out of the office with a steady pace after hearing an active shooter, I ran from my home and started driving, trying not to break the law. When you were on the phone for 10 minutes with each other trying to figure out where the gun was, I was on the phone with her father and family trying to figure out where she was. When you left the Myers without knowing where your son was, I was desperately trying to get there as soon as possible. When you knew the gun was missing, you called the police, knowing it was your son who took it. I was having family call every hospital describing what she looked like. When you texted, "Ethan, don't do it," I was texting Madison, "I love you, please call mom." When you found out about the lives your son took that day, I was still waiting for my daughter in a parking lot. When you questioned the reasoning on why you would do this, I was questioning if I was doing enough to find her. When you got a chance to speak with your son, seeing him alive and showing no support, I was watching families reunite with their children, waiting for my moment. When you asked him why, I was waiting for the answer onto why the last bus never came. When you and the police showed up at your house, you didn't understand why they were there. And I was asking police if they checked every possible location and if I could go search too. When you texted about not losing your job and you needed a lawyer, I was still calling my daughter because she came first in all parts of my life. When you could leave your house, I was still a prisoner in Myers. When you worried about what people thought of you and feeling threatened, I was learning your son threatened my daughter and fatally shot her in the head. When you drove to get your burner phones for communication, I was laying on the floor in Myers for hours crying because I forgot how to speak. When you checked into your first hotel, I was telling Madison's 11-year-old sister she was gone. When you cared more about yourself and getting alcohol and supplies, I was identifying my daughter in a medical office wishing I could take her place. While you were hiding, I was planning her funeral. And while you were running away from your son and your responsibilities, I was forced to do the worst possible thing a parent could do. I was forced to say goodbye to my Madison. We all see things different. Some prioritize and some don't. Accountability can only be given if you actually try it in the first place. As a parent, we all make mistakes. This is a normal way of life. Usually when mistakes happen, we learn from them. We try to fix it or talk it over. But continuing to make the same mistake over and over again is no longer a mistake, it's a choice. That becomes a decision. Those decisions that you made ultimately took my daughter's life. Because you decided that you didn't want to parent and listen to your son. You took the right away for me to be a mother. You do not get to decide that. You do not get those privileges. You are not above anyone. I love being a mom. It's the one thing that I'm truly great at. You cared more about your well-being than the one life that you should put above anyone, your child. And because of that, you both took 4 beautiful children away from this world. Being a parent is the part of life that you should hold to the highest level. It's an honor to be a mother or a father. Even when you think you have done your best, you continue to do more. Unfortunately, you never made it to level 1. You say you wouldn't do anything different. Well, that really says on what type of parents you are, because there's a lot of things I would do different. But the one thing I would have wanted to be different was to take that bullet that day so she could continue to live the life she deserved. You show no remorse, no respect or compassion for our family. The same traits that you've bestowed upon your son. The traits that you have torn my family into pieces. The lack of compassion that you have shown is outright disgusting. Not only did your son kill my daughter, but you both did as well. The words involuntary should not be a part of your offense. Everything you did that day, months prior, and days after were voluntary acts of your son to commit a murder. Not just one, but multiple. Shaking your head during a verdict is the utmost disrespectful thing I have ever witnessed. At that moment, you felt your life is more
I think that was James. I think she's specifically talking about James in that moment.
more valuable than my daughter's. I will say that will never be true. You created a life that you took for granted. You decided that parenting wasn't a priority. Putting your child first should be the only priority. You didn't, and because of that, I've lost my daughter. I had to get answers after her death. Watching the video, hearing testimony on how your
If I had to guess which lawyer it was, y'all can put it in the chat. Which lawyer do you think it was? Because I think we can all probably guess who it probably was.
son executed my daughter. watching him put the gun to her head as she covered her head and pulled the trigger. Seeing pictures of her laying in her own pool of blood, knowing her body sat there for hours, that rigor mortis had already started to set in. So that when I identified her, her body was in a state I couldn't imagine. Hearing her sister scream over and over again night after night, watching her family and her friends fall apart. You created all of this. You created your son's life, which then allowed this to be his path, which should be yours as well. You don't get to look away. You don't get to cry. I didn't get that choice. You failed as parents. The punishment that you face will never be enough. It will never bring her back. It will never be a loss that you have suffered, and it will never heal the pain. Because one day you're going to be able to see your son, visit, hear his voice, possibly laugh, maybe see him grow. I will never see that again. The so-called loss that you say you have suffered doesn't even compare to the loss of a child. Your Honor, I request that the maximum sentence be enforced, as it will never come close to the life sentence I was given. A life sentence that I didn't ask for, but a choice that was made for me. A life that I will suffer because of their negligence. Thank you.
Okay, we're all going to breathe. Each and every statement, and I want to go through all of them. This one right here, Hana's sister, this one is really powerful. And we are going to keep going.
Thank you for being here. Good morning. Can you tell me your name?
Yes, Jill Swatley. Yes. Thank you, Honorable Judge Cheryl Matthews, for your time on this case. I know it hasn't been easy on both. Thank you also to Karen McDonald and the entire prosecution team. We appreciate your efforts. Your Honor, my trauma and devastation is hard to put to words, but I have done so in my letter to you. I would also like to mention Justin's brothers, Nathan and Clay. They are now forced to live a life without their beloved middle brother, Justin. My son, Justin, was the least deserving of his fate. He was the best son that any mother could pray for. Justin was brave, spending his final moments protecting a fellow student. He was hardworking, a lettered athlete, a top honor student. He was kind and inclusive to all. He was full of love and joy. His future was so very bright and full of possibilities. His passing has touched so many family members, friends, students, and the community in general. The ripple effects of both James and Jennifer's failures to act have devastated us all. This tragedy was completely preventable. If only they had done something, Your Honor, anything, to shift the course of events on November 30th, then our four angels would be here today, and Justin would be getting ready to celebrate his 20th birthday on the 18th of this month. If only, Your Honor, they had taken their son to get counseling instead of buying him a gun. If only they had secured that gun. If only they had spoken up that day in the counseling office. If only they had checked his backpack. If only they had taken him home or taking him to counseling instead of abandoning him at that school. I wouldn't be.
I'm just going to take a break in this because I want to point out the reason why I play these is because if I'm going to play what Jennifer and James say, I think it's really important to play the victim impact statements. These are the survivors of their inaction and their son's behaviors. And so I think it's really important. That's why I'm playing each and every one of them. I am going to play, and then, like I said, I am going to play James and Jennifer and their lawyers, and I do have the interview with the prosecutors. I have that queued up. And as long as we're done with this because I have until like 7:10 p.m. Eastern. So I have about an hour and 10 minutes left. But I think we can do it all. Especially the first part of of that interview with the prosecutors. I think parts of it were really powerful. So she was saying, she's right at the part where she's talking about what they could have done.
Be standing here today. Your Honor, I don't know what's in their hearts. I'm not a mind reader, but I only know the facts of this case. And the facts of this case, both cases, have been deeply disturbing. What I would like to share with the shooter's parents is an example of what love looks like between a mother and her son. This is what Justin wrote to me on one of the last birthdays that we celebrated together. Dear Mom, words cannot describe how thankful I am for you. You have been nothing but an amazing mother for as long as I can remember. Thank you for being a role model. Thank you for showing me what it's like to never give up. You inspire me to do better each and every day. I love you so much. Love, Justin.
That's so sweet.
It is devastating and heartbreaking that it doesn't appear that either of you cherished or even wanted your son. But I wholeheartedly wanted and cherished mine. You have failed your son and you have failed us all. This failure had deadly consequences that can never be undone, that can never be made right. I am asking, Your Honor, for the maximum sentence allowed. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mr. Schiller.
Good morning, Craig Schilling, Justin's dad. So Honorable Judge Matthews, for the second time in 6 months, I find myself standing in front of a packed courtroom, a victim. This time, I'm here to address a different judge and the parents of the deeply disturbed teenager that murdered my son. This is my opportunity to try to describe just how much the horrific event that took place back on November 30th, 2021 has impacted my life. It's my belief that an impact statement should not just describe how this particular event impacted me. I feel that it should also be impactful towards all who hear it. And in your case, Judge, I hope these words impact you in a way that influence your decisions here today. As I look around at all the lawyers, police officers, media folks, and the other victims, I can't help but ask myself, what could I possibly say that this whole scenario doesn't already say? This is messed up. Most people will never have to make a victim impact statement throughout the course of their lives. And the fact that the victims speaking here today are doing so for the second time in 6 months should speak volumes in and of itself. This is not normal. Living a life like this is not normal. So how does it affect a normal guy? To be completely honest with you, it remains a rather difficult and uncomfortable question to answer. In my previous impact statement, I've expressed many of my day-to-day struggles, from uncontrolled emotional outbreaks to sleepless nights to not being able to focus on normal daily tasks. Yeah, it's fair to say that I live every day with pain, anger, heartache, regret, anxiety, stress, you name it. They are all there, wreaking havoc in my once normal life. They say that time heals all wounds. Well, we're coming up on 2.5 years now, and I can assure you that the wounds are still as fresh as they were. I fight every day to not lose more of myself within that very hole. I've spent the last 30 years of my life busting my butt to support a family, raise children, and try to set myself up for some peace and quiet in the golden years of life. But the unthinkable has happened.
Am I back? Let me see. Okay, so y'all can't hear me. Okay, I'm back. Okay, good. Good. All right. All right. And I'm gonna work on my camera while he's talking. We're gonna keep going.
And that peace and quiet I've worked so hard for may never come to be. At least not to the degree that I've always imagined it. Literally every single aspect of my life has been affected by this tragedy. And I could spend a long time describing in detail just how it has impacted me, but it seems like it would be way easier for me to just tell you how this tragedy hasn't impacted me, because there's simply nothing on that list. Now that the verdict is out on this monumental case, I feel strongly that it has caught the attention of most parents across the country. The overwhelming facts in this case were all that was necessary to prove that James and Jennifer Crumbley not only neglected their son by failing to get the necessary mental care that was clearly needed, but provided him the very tools necessary to carry out those heinous acts of violence. It was these very facts that allowed not just one, but 2 full juries to find both of them guilty of involuntary manslaughter. I will always maintain the opinion that the facts that were presented in these cases were strong enough to convince any jury of their guilt, and that the verdict would have been the same regardless of where the trial was held. As I have maintained throughout the course of the past couple of years, being the parent of a murdered child tends to cause you to seek out the maximum penalties allowed for each guilty verdict derived from any of the criminal charges. I think this stance is completely justified, and would be so for any parent in the same position as mine. However, this is a court of law where a person is innocent until proven guilty, and the defendant has the right to dispute the facts of the charges against them. That being said, during the course of both of these trials, I did my best to capture every word and process all the facts. This is important because there is value in these facts, not just in the thousands and thousands of man hours invested in gathering, processing, and organizing the evidence, but also for being able to use that evidence to establish the cold, hard truth of this tragic situation, that James and Jennifer Crumbley failed in their parental responsibilities as they pertain to the shooter, who was their son. The cold truth that shows that they did nothing to address the obvious signs of the deteriorating mental state of mind clearly present within their son. And of course, the very hard truth that shows that they provided their son with exactly what he wanted to use to do what he did, and failed miserably to secure it properly. One would probably think that in order for something like this, or something of this magnitude to even happen at all, there would have to be a ton of things that went wrong. Although there were some things that definitely went wrong that day, for several of those things, I believe that if they had been handled correctly, we wouldn't be here right now. And James and Jennifer Crumbley carry the bulk of the responsibility needed to handle those things. During their trials, the overall similarities between the two were evident. And I believe this is why they were both convicted. Numerous facts that were the same for both trials showed clearly that the parents failed their son and ultimately the entire community. With Jennifer, the thing that resonates most is that she stated that even knowing what she knew now, she still wouldn't have changed a thing.
It was huge.
I almost died when she said that. 4 precious lives were lost at the hands of her son by means that she helped provide. She saw the drawing of murder drawn with the hands of her son. She sat and heard the request of the counselor and did nothing. And she still says that she wouldn't have changed a thing. I just don't understand how someone can be that heartless to make a statement like that. The blood of our children is on your hands too. This is but one reason why I feel that Jennifer should receive the maximum amount for her sentence. The facts presented should be all the others that you should need. With her distinct lack of remorse and
So he's talking about Jennifer's lack of remorse. And so for individuals that, because some people qualify for Medicaid, and sometimes a person can have primary insurance, and if they qualify for Medicaid, they can have secondary insurance as well. Some people are above that threshold and have a copay, and that's where I love talking about resources that are free or reduced, different services that are available for people. Even asking the therapist if they have a sliding scale or if they have any reduced fees. As a therapist, if I bill the insurance and somebody has a copay, legally I have to collect it, or if they have a deductible. But I have had some people where if we billed their insurance because they have a $5,000 deductible, it would cost them $140 a session. But we agree, like I get their financials. I might offer a reduced rate, but that means that I don't bill their insurance, because if I bill their insurance is going to expect me to bill them my full rate, and it can cause issues, and it's a whole thing. I still believe that it's an issue that our healthcare system is for profit, and that billions are made off of people not getting care or not accessing the services that they desperately need. And I don't think anyone should go bankrupt because they can't afford services. I don't think they had health insurance, but there still would have been, and that I don't, and that might have been a choice to not, I don't know. Like, so I'm self-employed, and I was really concerned with losing some federal benefits that we had in the past. I was able to apply and get, like, not apply, but I was able to get an affordable plan that was similar to the federal plan that we had, for less than what we were paying out of pocket for Cobra, for our federal plan. And so I do think that there are options. And I know the jury heard all the evidence about how much Jennifer spent on her horses and all of these things. And to me, she didn't take it seriously. Like, those are my thoughts and my opinion. Like, when he was looking up bullets in class, she's texting him like, haha, like, don't do it in class or something. And not really seeing, like, hey, are you okay? And not getting him additional help, especially with that friend that was taken into an inpatient treatment program unexpectedly, without being able to say goodbye, without having any contact. Um, yeah.
overall unethical understanding of the tragedy, I feel that the maximum amount of time available is needed for her to be able to fully comprehend the gravity of her actions and the lack thereof. With James, there were a couple of things that jumped out at me in particular, but one thing that is the toughest to digest is the fact that when the verdict was being read, he sat there and shook his head in total disagreement, as if to suggest that the jury was wrong and that there were no grounds for a guilty verdict. I was dumbfounded to see him shake his head with such disbelief, an action that only suggests that he truly believes he did nothing wrong. How could you possibly think that? 4 precious lives were lost at the hands of your son by means of but by means that he helped provide. He saw the drawing of the murder, drawn with the hands of his son. He sat and heard the request of the counselor and did nothing. I just don't understand how someone can so arrogantly dawdle in a pool of self-pity without being able to say one thing to justify themselves. The blood of our children is on your hands too. This is but one reason why I feel James should receive the maximum amount for his sentence. The facts presented should be all the others that you need. With this distinct lack of remorse and overall unethical understanding of the tragedy, I feel that the maximum amount of time available is needed for him to be able to fully comprehend the gravity of his actions and the lack thereof. Throughout the course of all of this, and I'm talking from way back in the beginning, I just can't get over the fact that this tragedy was completely avoidable. There were some pretty obvious signs that were completely overlooked, and the bulk of the responsibilities to address those signs lied on the parents, and they failed. Across the board, failed. They willfully ignored the cries of their child and selfishly put themselves before helping him. This type of blatant disregard is undeniably unacceptable. It is a large reason why the events of that day were allowed to happen, and another reason why I feel they both need the maximum amount of time available to be able to fully comprehend the gravity of their actions and the lack thereof. We all know that having children is a big responsibility. Although extremely rewarding, it starts out pretty scary. I mean, let's face it, they don't exactly come with instructions. There's no mute button, and unfortunately, no pause or rewind buttons either. Oh yeah, and there are times in the beginning that they really smell.
That they really smell. Aw.
Yet we still have them. We still want that responsibility, even though it's not very clear what it all entails. But how can we accept that responsibility and not act responsibly towards that child? It doesn't add up. A child, even if he is an oopsie child, deserves the same amount of love, compassion, and care that every other child gets. A child deserves someone who is confident enough to lead by example. Because let's face it, it wasn't that child's choice to come into this world. You made them. And it's your responsibility to teach them how to live. It's your responsibility to set a good example. It's plain and simple, just like that, ladies and gentlemen. And the sooner we can figure that out, the better we all will be. Being a parent is hard work, but if it's done correctly, it can be the most rewarding work you ever do. There is no one that can tell you how to do it, because each child is so precious and unique. I mean, there's no other one like them in the entire world, and that says a lot. So cherish your one and onlys, and never give them up. Never give up on them. The results of doing so can be catastrophic and can affect the lives of so many other people. So I ask you all to go home today and hug your kids and make sure they know you are there for them, and make sure that they are all right. It's so crucial for the whole of our society.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling.
Lord. This one's powerful.
Our 10-year-old little brother had to learn how to write a eulogy for his sister before he even learned how to write essays. November 30th, 2021, all our parents did was send us off to school. Yet the next time they see Hana is to recognize her lifeless body in a medical examiner's office. I met up with Hana and a friend during school that day. When we split ways to go back to class, I just looked back and smiled. I didn't say goodbye. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to remind her that I love her, that she's my everything, the person I want to walk through life with side by side. I thought our future was a given. Of course, she'd play her first high school basketball game that night, get ready for all the other school dances, have her JV and varsity season for all the sports she played, get her driver's license, play her lacrosse season, have her first date, prom, graduation. She never got a chance for any of that. She didn't even get her 15th, 16th, 17th, or 18th birthday. These are only some of the high school experiences she never got to have, but it is absolutely nothing compared to the rest of everything she had going for her future. That list is eternal. Hana's life had only started to begin. 12:51 p.m., November 30th, 2021, that was the moment I became aware of the fragility of her mortality. Hana, who was healthy, Hana, who was only 14, shot 4 times. 12.5% of the bullets shot that day were at her. She took her last breath in her own pool of blood in a school she hadn't even been in for 3 months. Alone for 7 minutes while police passed by her, bleeding out as a security guard failed to put a tourniquet on her, dying as EMS took more than 10 minutes after the shooter had been detained to even give aid to her. Our Japanese grandma would often worry about anything bad happening to us because she knew how dangerous it is here compared to Japan. She told me on FaceTime that Hana would respond with a laugh, saying, "Don't worry, I'm a fast runner. I'll outrun them." It wasn't possible for Hana to outrun the bullets bought by you, Jennifer Crumbley, which were fired by the 9mm Sig Sauer that you, James, gifted to your son. Both used to murder Hana, Justin, Tate, and Madison. The fact is, no matter what you try to make yourself believe, Jennifer, you did fail as a parent, both of you. To love and to be loved, that is the human experience. It was up to you guys to show your son that. Instead of giving quality time and compassion, you gift your son a gun you knew caused extraordinary damage. There's a reason your kid didn't use the other 2 firearms or the .22 ammunition you own. I believe your actions cannot even be confined into the word failure. Your mistakes created our everlasting nightmare. So yes, you are still a danger to society because even after serving 2 years, you have yet to admit to your wrongdoings. And we know that when we do not learn from our mistakes, we repeat history. You call yourself a victim. The difference between you and Hana, Justin, Tate, and Madison, you and my family, you and all the students there that day, is that we didn't have a hand in causing this. You caused the most cruel thing I could ever imagine. You guys made loving Hana so painful. That is not a narrative, that is reality. For that, unless you have a time machine or the ability to stop time, there is no existing punishment or rehabilitation that will ever be enough. Because there is no way that the one life I have, I now have to live without Hana, my little sister, my best friend, my other half. To me, that makes the maximum sentence being 15 years too short. Hana didn't even have 15 years to live. Jennifer, you stated that even after knowing everything you know now, you wouldn't do anything different. I cannot fathom that. I would do anything to hear her footsteps coming up the stairs. You don't have to roll your eyes, it's on video that she said that. To not have an empty seat at the dining table, to have her come into my room and ask which clothes to order, to see her napping on the couch, to laugh and share a look when we accidentally say the same thing at the same time. There's not a day that goes by that I wish I hadn't run out of that building. If I knew what I know now, I would do everything differently in a heartbeat. I hope time makes you think differently. One day, I hope you would have chosen to care for your son, teach him how to love and to be loved, that you would not choose to buy the bullets that enter children's bodies, that you would not choose to omit relevant, important information to the counselor Sean Hopkins and Dean of Students Nicholas Ejak that could have helped their incompetent brains in one shared brain cell to decide to act and search the backpack, that you wouldn't still choose to hide from accountability when you're the reason we had to hide for our lives, that you would choose to save Hana, Justin, Tate, and Madison. Like my mother said, both of you should implore that even on your worst days, it's the tomorrow Hana doesn't get. The tomorrow she wanted to live so badly, the tomorrow that she should have. I can never do Hana justice when talking about her. She's all I want to talk about, and yet I would need a lifetime and still wouldn't have the right words to capture incandescence, humor, thoughtfulness, kindness, or loyalty. She's always there for you, helping without a second thought. She's always sharing, whether it's her smile, her food, her clothes, her crafts, her joy. She's funny. It's a given. She brings people together. Whether it's her contagious laughter or sarcastic wit, you will be laughing right along with her. She's noticing the small things, new shoes, new haircut, cute jewelry. But even more importantly, she makes you feel seen. She's extremely spirited. Her energy is unmatched on or off the court. She dresses up every holiday, every spirit day, the first one to put up Christmas lights, or any lights for that matter, not even realizing she was a light for so many others. She's the one who would not only playfully roll her eyes and smile when I would say I'm taller than her as I look up to her. Not only did I look up to her physically, because yes, she was taller, but as a whole, as a human being. She isn't perfect, but she's Hana, and to me, that's as close as you can get. I can't convey what losing Hana has done to me. I miss her with every breath I take. I think going forward without her is something I'll never be able to fully navigate. I believe the word sad is inappropriate to use because it does nothing to capture the hurt or the way my soul shattered. I've never felt every atom of my body igniting from anger until Hana was murdered. I didn't know what it was like to want to stop waking up in the morning until she wasn't here. I have never known pain that is forever until seeing Hana in a casket. I didn't know it was possible to feel so isolated even when you're surrounded by people. I didn't know how it feels to not know yourself at all. I have no idea who I am without Hana. She's my happy. She's my home. I look for Hana in everyone I meet, every place I go, and it's exhausting when I'm met with disappointment every time. But it's the world. It's all the people she would have met. I grieve for them too. To have that chance of Hana being in your life taken away from you is a tragedy in and of itself. She's more of a person than you two combined times a trillion could ever even hope to be. But when the day comes that you re-enter society in 13 years, I hope you live more like Hana. I hope you live every moment to the fullest like Hana. I hope you laugh every day like Hana.
My laugh was her look to the judge, 13 years, because so that would mean that they would be sentenced to 15 years because they have 2 years that they've been in jail awaiting trial. And so that was just that. I laughed a little at that glance to the judge.
And I hope you love unconditionally like Hana. That's it.
Thank you, Ray.
And then this is Hana's father, I believe. That's what I got from the chat I was in. I believe this next one's going to be Hana's father.
Find myself in another odd state of mind today. Rather emotionally blank right now. Part of that is having to do this again. Part of that is I'm mostly a private person, and the idea of having to pour my heart out again is irritating. And I can't match the eloquent words that have come before me in the previous impact statements. So I'll limit my words today. The defendants, through their choices, through their indifference and gross negligence, enabled their son to murder my daughter, Hana, and 3 other children. They chose to stay quiet. They chose to ignore the warning signs. And now, as we've heard through all of the objections, they continue to choose to blame everyone but themselves.
And I spared us that. So there were a whole bunch of objections today. And the family is sitting here. So the family had to wait. So these impact statements didn't start until like almost 2 hours. So the beginning part for about an hour, I think, the defense lawyers go back and forth arguing over like the fact that they shouldn't be held responsible for 4 deaths because there was one behavior that resulted like that there was one act that there shouldn't be these four, that the numbers are wrong. And so they, and the defense lawyer is just doing their job. I intentionally skipped that part because it was very, very difficult to watch. I did watch it. I was glad I was over with Surviving the Survivor, because like people were, because it was a nice supportive chat, and that was also well moderated. And so, but it was a lot. And so I get his frustration in this moment. We're going to keep going.
Every single objection, I think, that the council said this morning put the blame somewhere else, their son, not them. I stood before the court several months ago and spoke about the impact that Hana's murder had on myself and my family. Nothing has changed since then. It's impossible for me to truly convey the complete impact of my daughter's loss. Hana's murder has destroyed a large portion of my very soul. I've said these words before. It's still the truth. I remain a shell of the person that I used to be. I think of her and miss her constantly. Every day is a battle to attempt to move forward, struggle to get out of bed, to go through the motions of everyday life. Simple everyday sights and actions bring pain, as I think what it should have been like with Hana there with us. I think of all the good times that we've shared together as a family, and more on all of the memories that will never be. I will never think back fondly on her high school and college graduations. I will never walk her down the aisle as she begins the journey of starting her own family. I am forever denied the chance to hold her or her future children in my arms. A few words describing Hana can in no way fully capture her truly beautiful, caring soul, or impart her unlimited potential. Hana was absolutely beautiful and thoughtful person. She was always the first person to notice when someone had a problem and the first to go out of her way to offer help. She was incredibly curious and talented. She continually tried new things. She crafted homemade jewelry, tried cooking her own recipes, and played several sports. She was a record holder in track and a leader of her school's volleyball and basketball teams. She also hoped to join her older sister on the lacrosse team in the spring. She had aspirations of a career dedicated to helping people. All of this is lost because of the defendant's actions and choices. My position regarding the defendant's sentencing and their future has evolved through their trials. At first, I was focused on the importance of getting a guilty verdict, to have the message conveyed to the public that this type of behavior and choices are not acceptable. I didn't have strong feelings about their sentencing. It was just something that would be determined by the system. My view, however, has changed as the defendant's level of defiance has grown. Instead of acknowledging any mistakes, they continue to show no remorse. They take no accountability. They and their lawyers continue to try to change the narrative and portray the defendants as victims of the prosecution team. They blame everyone but themselves and make threats of retribution. The facts have already been presented. The jury has found them guilty. Multiple juries have found them guilty. Hana, Madison, Tate, and Justin are the ones who have lost everything, not the defendants. As such, I ask that this court to sentence the defendants to the maximum allowable penalty of 10 to 15 years in prison. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being
here. The pain of losing a child violently. So not just losing a child, losing them in this matter, I sent my child to school. That's all I did. And that's what I'm supposed to do. That adds an additional layer to it. And then being taken in this harmful, painful, reckless, to be taken in this way, it makes it so much harder to grieve and move forward. Uh, he will never be the same. None of the individuals, none of the survivors, they will never ever be the same. I work with individuals that have experienced this type of loss. And what we learn to do is to live a life that still honors their person. But first, sometimes we have to start with them wanting to move forward without them. There are individuals that will struggle, and so trigger warning for, but they will struggle with thoughts of not wanting to be here anymore because they have to go on without their child. And there will be severe, you say depression, but like it's this severe heaviness and pain. And then if they have any surviving children, being able to still parent them and still live, because imagine having to send your child back to school, your child going, maybe even, I think that school, I don't know if Oxford, I wonder, because sometimes when mass things happen in buildings like that, sometimes the buildings shut down. Like there, and also a lot of the kids, sometimes they decide that they can't go back. You all know individuals that have been following me for a while. Some of you may be new, so I will say I am a graduate of Virginia Tech. We had one of, and now I think there have been larger than the one that happened at our school. I can still remember where I was and what I was doing when I heard that there was a individual that they were looking for someone. Um, the situation happened in the dorm that I used to live in. I used to walk by all of the buildings. My husband, he was there during it. I was not. I was at I was in graduate school. Um, but my entire time was completely thrown off. And that was where I learned grief in a whole new way. Individuals who are, and I wasn't there, and I hated the way that the media swarmed onto the campus and they would shove mics into students' faces, because those kids were just trying to like live there, just trying to go to campus. They're trying to go to class. Classes were canceled. People were given the option to either, because it was towards the end of a semester, people were given the option to keep the grade that they had, or if people needed to increase their grade, professors were extremely lenient to work with people on options. But it was during that time that it was like, because people would say things like thoughts and prayers, or people would say things that would infuriate me. And that's where I talk about toxic positivity. If you ever know somebody that has experienced grief, that has experienced loss, I would encourage you to sit with them in their pain. And that's where that particular father, his pain, and every single person that spoke, their pain was just so palpable. And that's why we just kind of did our breathing and we sat in it, because that's where people feel like they're not alone. They often struggle when they see other people happy and other people living their lives, because it is a struggle, like he said, to just get out of bed. And I thought that was important to note. And so um, I think there's one other one. I think this one gets a little fiery, and I think you all wanted to know my thoughts. And so we'll keep going.
Mr. Muir.
Tate Mears' dad. First of all, Mark, Karen, the whole team, strong work. Everybody said you couldn't do it, and you did it. For our family, it's not time to celebrate. This tragedy has taken an incredible toll on our family. So our family's not going to give the Crumbley family a second of our time up here. It's time to turn our focus now. This is the low-hanging fruit. Now it's time to turn our focus to Oxford schools who played a role in this tragedy. You know, I hear this morning when we're listening to all the objections and hear Sharon talking about protecting the criminals' civil rights, constitutional rights.
So I skipped that part. So Sharon, I thought it was Shannon. Did he say Sharon? I feel like he said Sharon, but it's Shannon. She asked for them to be able to have the constitutional right to talk with their child. Like she said that.
Where's my rights being protected? I fight for everybody in this room. My rights aren't being protected. Criminals' rights are more important than our rights, my rights. We are ready for our government to perform an investigation on this tragedy. Many don't know that our government has not investigated this murder. A pre-shooting investigation, a day of the shooting investigation, and a deep dive investigation into the horrible response to this tragedy, the disrespect shown to us families, the simple things like trauma training for somebody like a Sheriff Bouchard, who we got to talk to on the day that we got to go identify Tate. And he referred to Tate as a girl because he was too busy that night working to cover it up, instead of learning about every kid, Tate, Hana, Justin, and Madison.
Most schools don't.
It's time for the whole truth to come out. It's time to learn from this, from the purchase of the gun to the response. That's when real change happens, is when we can look at something and we can evaluate it, apply lessons learned. That's when real change happens. So Hana, St. Juliana's family ready for the truth? Justin Shelley's family ready to hear the truth? Nicole Baldwin's family ready to hear the truth? Tate Mears' family's ready to hear the truth. Quit denying us that. It's time to drive real change from this tragedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I believe that his statement was his understandable frustration that there are more people, in my personal opinion, okay? Because I heard the testimony in both James and Jennifer's trial, and to me, there are little things that could have been done, like a formal risk assessment. So I have a video on who was at fault, and I played some of the footage from, excuse me, from, I think I played it from James's trial, and then also I played some things all together to say, was it mom, was it dad, was it the school? And really, my thoughts are, I think it's a combination of, I think everybody could have done something different in this situation. And as a parent, God forbid, if something happened, I would want to advocate to make sure that no parent ever had to be in my shoes again. What that father is probably dealing with is the feeling that things haven't changed systemically to make sure that this doesn't happen. Yes, we are holding Jennifer and James responsible, but that nothing has happened systemically from how he sees it to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen again. So that's what I think that was about. All right. So okay. Now we're about to get to Jennifer's statement. Hold those. Whoa. And I said 7:10. I'm gonna go till like 7:30. So we're good. So don't look at the time and think that we're good on time.
That concludes the 15 impact statements.
There's no one else, you're not presenting anybody else.
Correct.
Ms. Smith, what would you have to say on behalf of the client?
Your Honor, my client would also like to make a statement. Would you like me
Of
to?
course.
Okay.
Of course, you may both.
And so nobody formally made a statement in support of Jennifer or James. Nobody, but like not in person. So some people might have written letters, but nobody gave a statement in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Either way, you can stay there.
Your Honor,
Just kidding.
you're
Right?
okay. Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Okay, it's okay. She said she's okay. It's okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
I sit here today to express my deepest sorrow for the families of Hana, Tate, Madison, Justin, and to all those affected on November 30th, 2021. The dragging weight this has taken on my heart and soul cannot be expressed into words. Just as I know there is nothing I can say that's going to ease the pain and suffering of the victims and their families. There's a quote I heard that rang true. Grief. For those of you who understand, no explanation is needed. And for those of us who do not, no description is possible. I've taken countless nights of lament over the anguish and shame I carry, knowing what my son did, the harm he caused to innocent lives, the families, and to the entire Oxford community. I pray all the victims are the embodiment of God's mercy and peace, and that He heals your broken spirits. When I was on the stand, I was asked if I would have done anything different. I was horrified to learn my answer I would not have was completely misunderstood. That answer is true because my son did seem so normal. I didn't have a reason to do anything different. This was not something I foresaw. That was the intention of my answer and how I interpreted the question. With the benefit of hindsight and the information I have now, my answer would be drastically different. If I even thought my son could be capable of crimes like these, things would have absolutely been different. Even worse, when I learned during the police investigation that he had been planning a school shooting before November 30th. He was not the son I woke up, but he was not the son I knew when I woke up on November 30th. The Ethan I knew was a good, quiet kid. He loved his pets, family vacations. My husband and I used to say we had the perfect kid. I truly believed that, and that's who I saw and thought I knew. As the details started emerging during discovery, I was horrified to learn concerning behaviors my son was reported doing at school. Refusing to take a makeup test he told us he took. Sleeping in class. Drawing pictures of guns on his assignments. Writing, quote, "My family is a mistake." Watching a video in class of a mass shooting that fatal day, along with internal communications that took place between his teachers and counselor, Mr. Hopkins.
She's blaming
That he
this.
is, quote, "on my radar," and, quote, "he seems to be having a rough time," was never disclosed to us, his parents. The school claimed this was not abnormal behavior because of the pandemic and Oxford being a, quote, "gun community." To say I was furious to learn this information is an understatement. This is not normal behavior to us and very different than what Ethan led us to believe was happening at school. Not only were you left in the dark about previous concerning behavior, but in the counselor's office that morning, none of those previous issues were brought to our attention. I can't stop thinking, had they been, the conversation that morning would have been much different. That we would have taken a deep dive into what's really been going on with my son. I wonder if Hopkins and EJAC have those same regrets too. Instead, we are led to believe, not only from Hopkins and EJAC, but from Ethan as well, that this was an isolated event. We felt confident in trusting the professional's advice to let him stay in school that day. Quote, he does not pose a threat to himself or others. It was suggested that him being around peers would probably be good. We agreed. We were never asked to take him home that day. If that was discussed as the best course of action, we would have obliged. The prosecution keeps saying we didn't give them the big picture that morning at the counselor's office. But what they failed to acknowledge is the bigger picture the school did not give us. I'm not the same person I was prior to November 30th, 2021. This tragedy has changed who I am and has taught me some very valuable lessons. It said in suffering, we gain wisdom. I've also gained God. In the quiet hours of myself, I prayed to him.
She's talking about her suffering. Her suffering? Like, to me, this just, and how the school did her wrong and how everybody else failed her. That's what I got. That's what I'm getting from all this.
About the deep impact this tragedy has had on the families and the endless pain no one should ever have to feel. For it is God who holds a true understanding of our pain. I've also learned to depend on him for peace and strength. Alone, I'm not strong enough. I've learned that we cannot tell or predict what will happen to us in this life. One day you wake up and everything can change. We can, however, decide what happens in us, how we take it, what we do with it. And that's what really matters in the end. That's the test of living, is how we take the unimaginable, the tragedies, the raw hardships, and make them a thing of worth and beauty.
And to me, that was to say this, to call what she's going through and what her son, or like how what her son did is impacting her, or even encouraging the families to turn this tragedy into, I don't know, like to me, this wasn't a good idea. It wasn't. And it's going to get worse. And I'm sorry.
I also learned to never think this could not happen to you, and stereotype that bad kids come from bad parents. The prosecution has tried to mold us into the type of parents society wants to believe are so horrible, only a school or mass shooter could be bred from. This is a very trivial assumption to have. We were good parents. We were the average family. We weren't perfect, but we loved our son and each other tremendously. Everything we strived for was to make sure our son had the best life we could give him, to grow up with traditions and experiences we had, to be the best person he could be. I know we did our best. The love I have for our son, mixed with regret for not seeing what was ahead, weighs heavily on me. My point is, this could be any parent up here in my shoes. Ethan could be your child, could be your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, your brother, your sister. Your child can make a fatal decision, not just with the gun, but a knife, a vehicle, intentionally or unintentionally. If there's anything the general public can take away from this, is that this could happen to you too. The tragedy has taught me the true meaning of unconditional love, as I watch my parents still love and care for me wholeheartedly, no matter what has happened. If there's nothing else I can do right in life, I do still love my son unconditionally, and perhaps that is my purpose. Your Honor, I don't envy the decision you have to make today. I understand this is a novel case, and punishment expectations are high, not just from the prosecution, but from all those affected as well. The heartbreaking journey these families have endured. Hang on, I have to back up. I missed my most important. I need to cross.
She should
The
have.
most valuable piece of wisdom I gained is the power of forgiveness. To forgive the prosecution for the slander and hate against me and my husband.
We have to laugh to keep from crying. Forgiving the prosecution for the slander and hate aimed at me and my husband. Like literally, in her statement, she is forgiving the prosecution. Okay.
Ms. McDonald, Mr. Keys, I have hated you with deep anger, but hate is too heavy of a cross to carry. I need to be set free of that burden and recognize that you are people just like me, imperfect. but a child of God. I know He wants good things to happen to you, and in any conflict, whatever the circumstances, He is there loving both sides. To the victims and the families, I stand today not to ask for your forgiveness, as I know it may be beyond reach, but to express my sincerest apologies for the pain that has been caused. Your Honor, I don't envy you in the decision you have to make today.
Like the way that she read the "I give you my sincerest apologies" part, like she said the words. She said the words. And that's where somebody else mentioned Ruby Frankie, and like Ruby Frankie might have been able to give her some tips for like how to at least, and I don't know how, I don't know, but like there wasn't an ounce of empathy, or I didn't feel it. That apology at the end, she said the words. But okay. And then we have to listen to Jennifer. I'm sorry, not to Jennifer, to Shannon in just a second.
Death. My time in confinement has been filled with deep remorse, regret, and grief over this tragedy. I have taken this one day at a time, trying to survive, navigate, and cope with the endless heartache, pain, and grief I feel for the family.
Ma'am, this is not about you. This is not about you. But okay.
Of Hana, Justin, Madison, and Tate. I've also lost myself over my son's wrongdoing. I've been shredded by the public opinion of me, shamed as a horrible parent, pained to be a terrible person. But the worst hell I carry is my own self-judgment, remorse, and deep regret. I've been criticized, I don't show emotion. I'm unsympathetic, I don't cry enough. But alone I grieve. And if you were to look into me internally, you'd find I've died on the inside. I will be in my own internal prison for the rest of my life. Your Honor, I ask you to take consideration that I have been locked in a cell 23 hours a day, essentially in solitary confinement, for over 28 months, and that the court finds.
And so, okay, so she wasn't actually in solitary confinement. The jail she's in, and because her case is kind of high profile, they might have kept her isolated from the other inmates for her own protection. I don't know why she's only getting an hour a day, but she's been in jail for the last 2 years, and I could see that being a possible reason why.
A fair and just sentence for me.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Your Honor, as I pointed out in my sentencing memo, this was a no-win case. When we walked in the door, there are no winners here. Every single person was home here.
Agreed.
And there's also no limit on the amount of sadness, grief, and horrific emotions that are felt across the board in this case. And when Mrs. Crumbley does express remorse, when she expresses sadness, there's a tendency, and there has been a tendency.
Her lawyer didn't do a good job with that, because the lawyer took back remorse for sadness, and the judge is going to make note of that later. Because she should be showing remorse for what happened, but even her lawyer kind of took that back and said sadness. And so, okay.
For people to say she's shifting from sadness to the victims and putting it on herself. She's not doing that. There's an abundance of sadness. There's enough sadness to go around for all of the victims, for Mrs. Crumbley, for everyone involved in this case. It's not surprising that the victims have come in and obviously want the maximum sentence. There has been a narrative throughout this case that they believe is true. And this court knows that there is other information that was not a part of this case. And I believe this court knows the defense was hugely hamstrung, and I think the court was pained at times over what to do.
I guess I'm not sure.
I'm talking about not being able to call the medical professionals, not being able to call the shooter to the stand, not being able to cross-examine on various pieces of evidence.
I'm not convinced the shooter would have helped you.
Okay, all of those are obviously issues, but
I don't know if the judge is just done with the lawyer right now, because normally a judge would not interrupt a closing state or like this type of statement. Normally the judge would not interrupt this, but the judge is going to frequently, like the judge has a few more thoughts about what Shannon is saying.
There were things that hamstrung the defense. And
Are you
I
talking
do
about
believe-
the forensic records?
I do believe the shooter would have helped, and I do believe the forensic records would have helped. And I understand the court has already ruled on that. I understand that. I think the tendency, though, after hearing the narrative that has been made public, has been to make Jennifer Crumbley sound like a monster, to vilify her, to make her sound like a horrible mother, an evil person. And the truth is, it's an effort to put her in a category of other, to say this is not something that could happen to any of us. And it is. It is something that could happen to any of us. And people fail to realize what the sentencing memo shows the court through numerous letters of support, that Mrs. Crumbley does have a kind heart. She does have compassion. She has spent night after night crying, not for only herself and her son, but also for the victims and for what her son did and what she will live with, knowing he did, and what she missed all the years forward. At the end of the day, we asked the court to look at Mrs. Crumbley's role in the offenses. We asked the court to consider that while she did not oppose having a gun in the home, she was not the person who was responsible for storing the gun and believed it was being stored properly and that it was locked. Mrs. Crumbley obviously testified, and all of the evidence at trial showed she believed there was a string lock, a cable lock placed on the gun, on the weapon.
You know, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that has really troubled me from your sentencing memo, because you spent a lot of time talking about the fact that she didn't know anything about the gun. She didn't lock it, she wasn't responsible for it. But at one time, she was texting her husband to see whether or not he got the gun and how much it was. She posted pictures of it as her son's Christmas present. She shot the gun. And I don't know if you're aware of this, I don't know if either side was aware of this, but the first jury determined that there was a claim that the gun was the responsibility solely of defendant James Crumbley. And Mrs. Crumbley testified that when she returned from the range with the shooter on November 27, it was the defendant James Crumbley who was responsible for the 6-hour retrieve from the car and was to keep it safe. The first jury recognized that the GPS admitted in the case shows that even prior to the defendant James Crumbley returning to the house, the shooter was videotaping the unlocked 6-hour in the kitchen of the home. So that's not true. That's not true. She also testified that a key to the cable lock was kept in the rear stand in the kitchen, but it's clear that the cable lock was clearly never opened.
Your Honor, first of all, the jury's finding about the timing of the GPS and when the gun video was made is not correct. The evidence at trial did not support that. We know that's not correct. Mrs. Crumbley left the gun in the car so that James Crumbley could put the gun in the house and store it correctly. Mrs. Crumbley, there were multiple cable locks in that house because there was more than one cable lock. There was not just the cable lock that was on the Sig Sauer. There was more than one.
I don't recall that.
There were not more than one found, but whatever Ethan Crumbley did with the cable lock from the Sig Sauer, we don't know.
The gun wasn't locked.
It was never locked.
Your Honor, factually, during Mrs. Crumbley's trial, it was not proven that the gun was not locked. I don't know what happened at James Crumbley's trial.
You know about his statements. The gun was never locked.
Whose statements?
Mr. Crumbley's statements.
Mr. Crumbley and Mrs. Crumbley talked about how the gun had been left in all of the evidence I saw. Well, Your Honor, obviously we have
Go on.
disputes.
Go on.
Okay, so we are not going to listen to Shannon go on. Instead, I'm going to answer a question. So, uh, Rhonda, I think you're asking about mom, Jennifer. Is that the question? And so a person can have some traits or qualities without meeting criteria of narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissism is a spectrum. I did a video recently about healthy levels of like confidence, like that's the way that it can come off. Narcissism becomes pathological when it results in gaslighting, manipulation, those kinds of things. I don't know enough about her to know anything about her mental health or anything like that. Um, it seemed like she was enjoying her life and living her life, and I don't know. It was a whole thing. So do I think that Ethan was autistic? On one of my videos about mom as well, somebody thought that mom might be on the autism spectrum. And sometimes when people have this flat way of communicating, or if they come across maybe a little awkward or odd, sometimes the first diagnosis that people jump to is autism. So Ethan was assessed, and to my knowledge, the only diagnosis that they came to, there was no diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and there were multiple people that assessed him. I want to say he might have had at least two psychological or psychiatric assessments while he was incarcerated. That was for his Miller hearing, and I have my coverage. I have one of the videos from his Miller hearing down in the description. Okay. Let's jump ahead to James real quick. All right, so let's jump ahead to James.
I will address the court. For the record, he does have something typed out that I typed out for him, so it was bigger. It's easier for him to read, Your Honor. You can't read. No, she said she cannot tell him to do it. He would, Your Honor, there was some confusion about whether or not he could get his second handcuff off. I was just clarifying. The court said she cannot tell the sheriff's office.
Does he have to keep that handcuff?
Yes. I was just clarifying, Your Honor. Thank you.
Before I address this court directly, I want to do something that I had never been able to do throughout this time until now. I want to say I can't imagine the pain and agony that for the families that have lost their children and what they're experiencing and what they're going through. As a parent, our biggest fear is losing our child or our children. And to lose a child is unimaginable. My heart is really broken for everybody involved. I understand my words are not going to bring any comfort. I understand that they're not going to relieve any pain. And quite frankly, they probably just don't believe me. However, I really want the families of Madison Baldwin, Hana St. Juliana, Tate Meyer, Mir, and Justin Schilling to know how truly sorry I am and how devastated I was when I heard what happened to them. I have cried for you and the loss of your children more times than I can count. I know your pain and loss will never go away. Part of you will be missing forever. But please know that I am truly very sorry. I am sorry for your loss as a result of what my son did. I cannot
So even after he showed, like, he was crying, he was telling Ethan, I love you, I love you. Like, he seemed to have more of an emotional response than mom did at all, in my opinion. And then I did want to get I think Shannon thrives on her portrayal of defending the most blah blah blah. What's the pathology of Shannon offering house arrest at her home to her client? So people have brought up ethical things, and I do not personally know the boundaries that lawyers have. I know for me with psychology and counseling, like, I'm not Facebook friends with clients. I don't follow them on social media. I wouldn't go on like a client's podcast, because like a current client, I would never partner with them for a business venture, or like there are specific ethics that I'm called to, and that it's to protect my client, and it's also to protect me. And she seemed to take an interest in this case, in my opinion, that like, ugh, I don't know. Because do y'all remember her closing? Her closing was a train wreck for me. For me, it was not helpful at all for Jennifer. And I don't think offering her guest house, because the prosecution basically said that that would be a step up. Like, her guest house is nicer than where where Jennifer was living before everything happened. And so the prosecution was definitely against that. And I don't get it. Um, Phoenix asked, I keep wondering how Ethan feels about his actions impacting his parents. So I don't know if I don't think he would have wanted it to impact his parents. I think he cared about his parents, maybe a little. I don't know. I don't know. I think he thought he was the only one that was going to be arrested. I think he thought he was the only one that was going to go down for this. He's probably going to feel appropriately guilty that his behavior impacted his parents, and he'll have to sit with that. That'll be between him and his treatment team. Like, I don't know. And then Elaine, thank you so much. The one thing that annoys me is when people say high functioning autism just because a client or a person is high IQ. I agree, that does not necessarily mean that they have autism. I have seen people with high IQs sometimes be twice exceptional, have ADHD, or have OCD or anxiety or something like that. Sometimes an individual might have like tics, or they might stem as a way to calm, but so like I will sometimes do things that helps regulate and calm. It's not only individuals with autism that do those things. Breaking misinformation, like, that's a big thing that I like to do here. Let's keep going.
express how much I wish that I had known what was going on with him or what was going to happen. Because I absolutely would have done a lot of things differently.
Wish he had been specific, I guess. Like, what would you have done different? I don't know.
Again, my heart pours out to every single one of you.
I wish the judge had made him look at her. Like, I've seen judges do that. To me, if I was I would not have wanted him to be looking at me for my own personal thing. I think he should have directed his statement forward to the courtroom, and not. To me personally, I don't think he should have been looking back at the families.
It really does. Judge Matthews, I'm not gonna overdo a lot of things that were already said. But I know the full amount of pressure that you have on you and the responsibility that has been placed on you throughout this case. I have the utmost respect for you, and I'm simply going to ask that you sentence me in a fair and just way. You presided over my trial and heard the evidence that was presented against me. You know that what my son did, I was not aware of, or that he was planning it, or that he obtained access to the firearms in my house. There was absolutely no evidence that suggested that. As my attorney has told you, I've been on lockdown for 23 hours a day. I've not been able to speak to my son since November 30th, and I have not been able to speak with my wife since December 3rd. I know that I have experienced pales in compassion to what those families who've lost their children.
I think maybe it should have been comparison. I think he missed that word. I think it should have been comparison.
And countless other victims experience every day because of what my son did. But I want you to know I too grieve for everyone, as I have explained. For everyone that's been affected by what my son pled guilty to doing. And I'll continue to feel this pain for the rest of my life as well. If I could go back and change things, if I could go back and do things differently, and maybe none of us would be here today. So again, I ask Your Honor to impose a just and fair sentence based on the truth about what you heard during my trial. I'm asking the court to sentence me to time served and place me on probation for the maximum time allowed with the GPS tether for as long as the court deems necessary.
All right, so we're gonna have to skip ahead to the judge. So I'm gonna have to skip his lawyer. I think he has a very good lawyer. His lawyer is going to give a very good statement in defense of her client and what he wants. The prosecution is going to do a phenomenal job. Let's get to the judge.
For immeasurable grief, it's completely understandable to hate everything associated with these proceedings. I spent both trials looking out at all the family members, and I wondered to myself, I was looking straight on at Mr. St. Juliana, whether or not he'll ever smile again. And that's very difficult. I'm very aware of my job in the situation, very aware of my job, to not be swayed by public opinion, by media, by any of those different things. I can't and will not pretend to understand the pain the families are experiencing, but I did sit through these trials with you. I saw what you saw, I heard what you heard, so I can and will offer my deepest and most sincere condolences for your unfathomable losses. It's as I just said, it's not my role, it's not the role of the court system to make an example of the defendants. However, it is a goal of sentencing to act as a deterrent. These charges are not jury edicts about gun ownership or keeping the gun in a private home. All of the jurors in both trials agreed that they understood that. Parenting is a complex job. Parenting practices around the world share the goals of ensuring health and safety, preparation for life as a productive adult, and transmission of cultural values. Parents are not expected to be psychic. But these convictions are not about poor parenting. These convictions confirm repeated acts or lack of acts that could have halted an oncoming runaway train. About repeatedly ignoring things that would make a reasonable person feel the hair on the back of their neck stand up. Opportunity knocked over and over again, louder and louder, and was ignored. No one answered, and these two people should have and sure didn't. Mr. Crumbley, it's clear to this court that because of you, there was unfettered access to a gun or guns, as well as ammunition in your home. You characterized yourself as a martyr and threatened the well-being of the prosecutor. Mrs. Crumbley, you glorified the use and possession of these weapons. Your attitude toward your son and his behaviors was dispassionate and apathetic. Your response to school staff after a 12-minute meeting was, "Are we done here?" During your trial, you announced that you wouldn't do anything different. I understand that that might have been misinterpreted, but it did cut the victims deep. Because of both of your actions and inaction, among many, many other things, the world is missing out on a top college university will miss out on Tate's star quality football skills. I met Raina, who's wise beyond her years, and she's told us that among many, many other things, community will be denied Hana's kindness, creativity, and sense of humor. Among many, many other things, the world will miss is Madison's kind and loving soul and the light that reflected her beauty both inside and out. Although a hero in death because of his organ donations that helped so many, we will never know where Justin, an excellent student with vast skills and interests, described as a mentor and a leader, would have left his giant imprint. The impact statements given here and the written statements provided to the court describe the cataclysmic impact the deaths of these children have had on their children. With regard to each defendant, this court has spent night and day thinking about this case, as you can imagine. I prayed about this case, I thought about this case, and I've considered the possibility for rehabilitation, the need to protect society, the penalty appropriate to the conduct and goal of deterring others from similar conduct. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation reports. I am, of course, sadly familiar with the facts and circumstances of these cases, as well as those surrounding each defendant. The advisory sentencing guidelines in this matter do not capture the catastrophic impact of the acts or inaction in these matters. The guidelines do not take into account the complete lack of insight both defendants have for their behavior to this very day. The guidelines do not account for the severity of the circumstances in this matter. The guidelines ignore the survivors, including shooting victims Phoebe Arthur, Elijah Mueller, Riley Franz, Kylie Osage, Jonna Shudo, Molly Darnell, and Aiden Watson. They were deeply wounded, both physically and emotionally. In addition to the 7 wounded, each of the defendants' gross negligence has caused unimaginable suffering to hundreds of others as a result of what happened that day. Each act or inaction created a ripple effect. Therefore, an out-of-guidelines sentence is appropriate and proportional. The court uses the useful tool of the legislative guidelines, which embody the principle.
So the defendants might be able, because the judge deviated from the guidelines, but I think she perfectly talked about why she deviated from them, but they might be able to appeal because they're definitely going to appeal the guilty verdict, and they might be able to appeal the this sentence as well. I'll mention here uncivil law talked about that the defense denied an expert that could have talked about pathways to violence. And that expert could have talked about how difficult it is to foresee this type of behavior happening, and that even experts get it wrong. And in uncivil laws, like in the comments on his video, I mentioned the fact that as a psychologist, when I do a risk assessment, it's not 100%. I could assess somebody for risk and I might miss something, and something could happen. But at least I did that like I would have that documentation of that formal risk assessment. And to me, in this case, there wasn't a formal risk assessment that was done. And I think the school should have done one. That's my opinion. Or they should have referred the family immediately to, if they thought he was at risk for unaliving himself, because that was all that was assessed for during that meeting, that they should have sent him in for an evaluation with it that day. Because even the counselor said that he would have called CPS if the parents hadn't had a counselor by that next day. But okay. And so and everybody does what they can with what they have. Um, I do think having licensed mental health professionals in schools, having access to somebody that is trained in those formal assessments, I think that's important. But we'll keep going, and I'll come to the chat.
Principles of proportionality, while also taking into account the nature of the offense and the background of each defendant. I believe that the following sentences would be in the best interest of justice and are reasonable and proportionate to the seriousness of the matter and the circumstances surrounding each defendant. With regard to Jennifer Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court, Ms. Crumbley, that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. You will have credit for 858 days. State costs are $272. There's a crime victims' rights fee of $130. You and your agents may not have any contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hana St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling. I will issue another ruling with regard to contact with your son, the shooter. Excuse me. As to defendant James Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections, that you receive credit for 858 days, that you pay state costs in the matter of $272, that there is a crime victims' rights fee of $130, that you or your agents have no contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir.
All right. And so he's going to get the exact same sentence. I do want to switch over to the press conference that happened after. I was surprised that the judge gave them so much time. I was thinking it was going to be less than that, especially since this is a first in a case. Like this is the first where parents have been charged after a mass situation, that and the child was the one that did it. But I think that the unique parts of this case was, number one, the parents are the ones that not only purchased the weapon, they purchased it for him. This was a gift for him, and they left it unsecured. He specifically asked for that one. And despite having no real social connections, he's declining in school. He's becoming more and more isolated. All of these things happening, they give him unrestricted access to a weapon. And if you think your kid is off, I do recommend taking a look at their phone, taking a look at their, like, especially like Snapchat. If they have Snapchat, if they have DMs, like you are taking a look if they have social media. Sometimes kids will have like fake accounts where you don't even know that they have accounts, or they have accounts on friends' phones. I also think that, like, for if somebody's concerned, to please say something. And I'm glad that the chat was pretty kind here, because so I have a lot of family members that are veterans, that are responsible gun owners, and they make sure to secure their weapon. One particular family member, because he has kids under the age of, I think, maybe under the age of 15, 16, and he has a biometric lock. So only his fingerprint, and he serves in our military. He's very cautious about safety, and so in the home he can quickly access his weapon if he were to ever need it, and it's just putting his fingerprint there, and he's able to get what he needs to get. He has taken his kids to the range. Like, there's nothing wrong with hunting, there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things. And if you see signs, please do not overlook it. Do not think that it's just, I don't know, the blues, or I don't know. Like, I would take a kid to get assessed if there are concerns. And so, yes, chat on gaming systems. That's a good. Sometimes it's hard to like, I don't know if parental controls. So my kiddo is young, and I'm able to use the Switch app to like restrict where he can't chat at all. Um, and I just this was tough. I'm gonna go on ahead and play the first part of the prosecutors talking with the media.
With the maximum sentence. I'm thankful for the victims. I think it brings never closure, but some acknowledgement, and I think particularly the statements from the judge who really seemed to understand and the weight of these crimes, and really put a fine point on the fact that yes, it's an emotional, terrible tragedy, but the sentence and the convictions were based on facts and evidence.
What did you make of both the Crumbley statements?
She's gonna pass it to him.
Do you want to take that one?
I like
Well,
her.
first I want to acknowledge the victims. Their statements never cease to inspire me. Every time, I told them before we walked out here, I don't know how they're still on their feet after all of this. And listening to all of their statements in this sentencing, in the shooter's sentencing, it is so inspiring, and their strength is really moves us. Listening to the Crumbley statements, I found to be disappointing. I thought they were additional examples of lack of remorse and blaming others. And what I was really hoping to hear, what the victims are really hoping to hear, was accountability. And I thought that was lacking, and I thought Judge Matthews hit the nail on the head when she made her remarks at the end.
When's the first time they would become eligible for parole?
The minimum sentence is 10 years. So after 10 years, correct, with credit for their time.
With credit for time served.
Can you explain, there was like some back and forth about the no contact order, and you guys are going to be filing a motion about that. Can you explain what that was kind of about in court today?
Yes, I believe the argument is they want to be able to stay in contact with their son and with each other. We maintain that we are going to take the same position we do in every case, and the Michigan Department of Corrections has a no contact between co-defendants. So
that's, they can't contact each other or their son?
the judge hasn't ruled on that yet, so she held that matter in
But that's what you
abeyance.
want.
We think the Crumbley should be treated just like any other defendant.
I have a question. When Raina St. Juliana was speaking.
So I did want to make a note. So I don't know that Shannon did anything that was against what lawyers are allowed to do. I believe lawyers are able to vigorously defend their clients, and I really lean to the other lawyers to talk about that, because the lawyer, Peter, and I've heard a few other lawyers talk about that they wouldn't have done it that way, but nobody has said that what she has done is something that would rise to a level that would result in a bar complaint or anything like that. Now, her clients might be able to submit an appeal based on ineffective counsel, but I think Jennifer liked Shannon. Like, I don't know that Jennifer will even know that that's like an option. And to me, James's lawyer did such, like, to me, I wasn't sure what the jury was going to find for James. I thought his lawyer handled things way better and had a way better argument than Jennifer's lawyer. And they were both found guilty. They both got the same sentence. In my opinion, it seemed like there were some questionable things. And like I said, on her website, she says that she vigorously defends her clients. And people have mentioned in the comments that she was the lawyer for Nasir, for the individual that essayed multiple gymnasts in the U.S. in the on the Olympic team, and I think within like college as well. Like he was a team doctor, and his behavior went unchecked for a really long time. I did also want to note that KM made a phenomenal response, that even if you don't have kids, to make sure that weapons are secured. To please, please, please. You never know. Somebody else's child could come to your house, and you not know that there's a safety plan, or that they're monitoring them for something, to make sure that that those things are done. All right. And I haven't confirmed that she was, like, that's what I've seen in the chat. So that's what I've seen in the chat. All right. And so let's keep, and my husband is feeding my child. Okay. So like that's what the leaning over and parenting for a moment, because right now is dinner time. Because I told y'all I had about like until like 7:15. We'll see. And so my husband is feeding our kiddo. So I am good to go to stay for a little bit longer.
About Jennifer Crumbley's statement that she wouldn't have done anything differently. There was some kind of reaction from the defense table that you remarked on. She said, "Don't eye roll, it's on video." Who is rolling their eyes?
She made the statement to one of the attorneys.
I think he's a lot more political. Does that make sense? Like she is my spirit animal. Like she's my, ooh, I don't know that I can answer this. Like I'm gonna need you to like if I'm gonna say something wrong, like I'm gonna have to hand this off to you. And I love it when she does that.
At the defense table.
I'll go back.
Who is rolling their eyes?
She made the statement to one of the attorneys at the defense table.
So you had a question?
Yeah. Did it seem like James and Jennifer Crumbley, maybe they realized it and just don't want to take accountability for it, but that they were still saying that they were sorry, but not for the right things? It seemed like, and I think Mark, you mentioned also, and maybe you, Karen, also, they're still trying to suggest that other people were to blame. Now they're trying to somehow align themselves with the parents on going after the school. And did it seem like that did them any favors there?
I can tell you what I think, and I can tell you what the victims remarked to us after, which is, and I pointed this out in court, feeling bad is natural, and we don't dispute that they feel bad. That's not what's important to victims of crime. And it's an essential part of our criminal justice system. The sentence should be fashioned in a proportional way, but what they want and need most of all is a remorse, which means acknowledgement of the wrongdoing and some sort of reconciliation or apology for that. And that didn't come. So, I'll leave the Crumbleys to their own statements, and I agree with Mark. It's disappointing.
And there is a trigger warning. She is going to talk about gun violence being the number one cause of death in individuals between the age of 10 to I think like 25 or something. Like there is the CDC has declared like a national mental health emergency. And so if you ever have a child, if you know a young adult that's struggling with those kinds of thoughts, please, please, please encourage them to get help. Please encourage them to find a therapist that is trained and competent in supporting individuals in that type of crisis. I work with people that struggle with those kinds of thoughts every day. And the thing that we try to do is build a life that they want to live. We try to address the underlying pain. We try to help them, because right now all they see is the pain. And I don't know. And now something that I see in younger and younger kids is there's this difficulty with tolerating like change, or like there isn't. And sometimes I have to work with the parents on supporting their child when they are frustrated, when they are upset, but not always fixing situations for them, or because then sometimes they get to be a teenager, and I'm not at all blaming, do you know what I mean? So I'm not blaming the parent in any way. Like parents do the best they can, and but to definitely seek out support and have that safety plan. I know our local hospitals and there are local agencies that will give out those gun locks for free. And they will also just there are things available. Now, I'm not a huge fan of psychiatric hospitalization if people can be safely maintained in their home, in their community. And that was a question that I got because I talk sometimes about what could have happened or what maybe should have happened. And at the point Ethan was like where he was at, outpatient therapy might not have been enough if he's having intrusive thoughts, if he's hearing voices. There was mixed feelings about was he actually hearing voices or were these just his dark thoughts versus like external. So hearing voices is it's a outside of your head type of experience versus like thoughts you have or obsessive thoughts. And so because my somebody asked me to talk about my thoughts about um those treatment facilities. I definitely think so. I don't like those like residential, like what Paris Hilton went to. Those, like, they're not sanctioned, they're not monitored by the health board. I'm not a fan of certain types of residential treatment, and I used to work at a residential treatment facility, and I'm thankful that once I increased in my training that I was able to not work there anymore because I just I had concerns about staff. Not and nobody was like breaking the law. Nobody was doing anything, but it was just hard to see healing happening in a space where kids have been removed from their families. And I was working with kiddos from age like 6 to like 8 or 9. And so a 6-year-old living away from their family full time, and these kids, their histories was just trauma after trauma after trauma. Like there was just like so much in their histories. And then sometimes they would then, because they would be like we did our best to maintain safety, but there could be residents could get physical with one another. We had to make sure and monitor to make sure that like other things didn't happen. And it was eyesight supervision 24/7, except for like if they're like showering or using the restroom. But yes. All right. So those are some of my thoughts on that. Let's keep
I
going.
have one other question. On the depiction of the phone calls,
Yes.
Mary Ellen Lehman said that it's basically just venting and frustration and not an actual threat. What's your reaction to that?
I think responding to that would somehow give validity to the.
All right. So y'all know me and my interrupting. So I live in Virginia, and a mother in Newport News just went to jail for, oh wow. So this was a different situation. So I haven't heard of this one. Um, I know of one in Virginia where the mom, what she's going to jail for was for, I think, having the weapon. She's not going to jail for her son shooting his teacher, and the teacher survived. So this was the teacher survived. The teacher knew that because there had been reports that he had shown it to kids, and the teacher went to administration. Administration did not believe her. They searched his bag, but they didn't search his person, which they should have called an SRO or a police officer to actually, because he had it in his pocket. And somebody even joked at her like, oh, he must have some big pockets. And he did. He did have it, and he was trying to unalive her. And I think there were major issues happening at home. The mother, I don't know what's happening with her parental rights, but in a case like this, especially with something this severe, and if there was any history there, because he had escalating behaviors over a period of time, and that teacher is suing the Newport News public school system, understandably, because she went to administration, I think 2 or 3 times that day, and after she was shot, she actually like helped her class to safety. And like that was extremely tragic, and that's something that happened right in my neck of the woods. I also heard of just like there is so much happening, and I really think that people should make sure to get help and support when it's needed. All right, let's keep going.
The statement, and I don't believe there is one, and the statements speak for themselves.
if their son is not a co-defendant, and maybe this is something to be decided later, but James and Jennifer are co-defendants, we know that for sure, correct? The question is whether their son is a co-defendant. Are you concerned that they may have contact with their son down the road and perhaps try to bend him in any sort of way for appellate reasons?
Well, the reason why the judge held that in abeyance is because it was a late objection, and the judge made note of that. So what we're going to do is coordinate with the Michigan Department of Corrections so we can review their policies as well, because he is a related defendant and is a bit of a unique situation. So we want to make sure that each defendant is treated the same as any other defendant in any criminal case. So we're going to ensure that happens.
And somebody asked if he was receiving treatment. So I do believe that he was, that Ethan Crumbley, that he was on medication. And within prison systems, if they're aware that somebody has a mental health condition, there are some that have treatment available. That if the person wants to do anger management classes, or if they want to do, and some people are court ordered to do those things, but that there are classes and trainings, people can do school. People, there are often options available within prisons. Most prisons are privatized, and so it can really depend on where a person is. But for individuals that need medication, because there is health care for inmates that is provided. Sometimes it's not great, no lies. Sometimes it's not good. But if people are on medication, as long as it isn't something like oxycodone or something, like as long as it isn't something like that, they can often continue their medication. And for him and his mental health, because if he is on medication, because I think he was on medication for depression. I could be wrong, but I thought he might have been on medication. So let's keep going.
And I want to make one point on that. The defense stated that they have a constitutional right to be a family. And the parents in that courtroom have been deprived of their constitutional right to be parents. And so that matters.
Can't imagine the pressure your office has been over the past few years. Side of relief tonight?
That's a good question. I know that we did the absolute best that we could. And I know that the people sitting in that courtroom, they know that how hard we worked and how dedicated we are to not just a verdict that would appease or make them feel even a little bit of acknowledgement, but also a fair and just prosecution. But it's really difficult, and it always has been for me to take a moment and talk about how hard it was for me or for us. And I know Lieutenant Tim Willis feels the same way as well, Special Agent Brett Brandon and Mark, of course, and our entire trial team. It's really hard to have to remark about how hard we work and how hard it's been when you're looking in the eyes of these parents every day who get up in unbelievable pain and grief and see this play out every day, and they still go on. And so my focus is there.
Do you think that you've changed the way the country now thinks about parental responsibility because of your case?
Well, Charlie, I want to thank you for a story you did that meant a lot to me and the people on our team when you interviewed local gun shop owners who said that there was a rise in cable lock sales after the verdict of James Crumbley. And I can tell you that was a moment of peace and that's what we're here for. However, most parents don't need a message like that. Most parents don't need to have a message sending that don't buy your son who's exhibiting signs of distress a 9mm deadly weapon and make it accessible. Most parents, most of us don't need Karen McDonald or Mark Keast or anybody to tell them that. And they certainly don't need a jury to tell them that. However, I think it's the entire tragedy and how it unfolded and how it occurred does bring awareness. And, you know, this is only the beginning. I've committed to really address gun violence like it should be addressed, which is a public health crisis. And access to weapons is only one thing. And we have a lot more to do to educate the public on how to prevent gun violence, because there's a lot we can do way before somebody gets their hand on a weapon, way before somebody even ends up in a state of crisis. And that is what I'm dedicated to doing going forward.
You said of the verdicts, this was an egregious case with egregious facts, and that those were precedent setting. What precedent does this sentence now set?
No, I actually don't. I don't really acknowledge it's precedent setting. There's a difference between precedent setting and rare. And this is really a rare set of facts. It really is. I think nobody standing here who's listened to any of it would say this is something that we see in the course of what we do. This is rare. This is egregious. And 2 juries agreed, the judge agrees. And I think most of us know that you have to exercise ordinary care, at least to prevent other people from the dangers that you know are foreseeable.
With the new safe storage law that recently went into effect, would a case like this, and God forbid it's never a case like this, but a case where a child gets a hold of a gun and causes harm to someone else or themselves, will it be easier, because obviously this was a monumental task for you guys to try these cases, but will it be much easier to prosecute individuals who are irresponsible with their firearms?
I think the thing I'm focused on is a different question, which is what and how much it will do to prevent, right? So that we don't have to assess whether it's a more useful tool to prosecute. The safe storage law is just bringing awareness so that we can prevent access to guns. The number one cause of death in this country is gun violence to children. It's the number one cause of death. And over 50% of that is suicide. So access to weapons is key. It's not everything in prevention, but safe storage is definitely critical. So
there is a legal component to it, though. I mean, and so sometimes the message is sent with that legal attachment to it. Do you think that awareness of knowing that they can be charged, obviously will keep down the number of cases that you get, but may also inspire people to make sure they're not on the other side of the law?
I absolutely think it will inspire people, educate, and they're more conscious of it. This type of set of facts, though, is so rare. It would be, a violation of your duty to secure your firearm and all of the other things that made it foreseeable that a death or serious harm would occur, which is so rare. But in general, yes, this is it's now a law, and most of us want to follow the law. So I think it's important.
One more question.
Your message to the community as you've been shepherding this for the last 2.5 years, do you think that this will be the ultimate deterrent for the community with this?
My message to the community is don't look away. These were tragic and awful deaths and what these families have gone through. And it is preventable. It is preventable. That is my message. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Wow. Okay. So any last minute questions before I close things out for today? I did just want to say there are people that are concerned about this verdict, and I'm glad that she clarified at the end, which was why I wanted to play that interview, because this was so rare. Most parents, when they have a weapon in the home, it's theirs. It's not specifically for their child. Or they might have, like, I've worked with clients that hunt, and they have like a hunting, but the parent is the one that secures it. The parent is the one that maintains it, and the parent takes it away if there is concern for depression, or like if there is any type of risk. The parent is the one that assumes that responsibility. And that this set of circumstances was just really, really rare. I think most parents are going to make sure to do what they need to do to keep their family safe, to keep just to be responsible. And so yes. All right. And so let me see. Oh wow, that's a good point. Neither one of them said anything about their son being in jail alone. He's in jail for the rest of his life. And I think they might, I don't know that they disagree with that. Like, I think based on what he did, and the mom talked about having unconditional love for him and wanting to communicate with him or talk to him, but also their appeals aren't done. And I don't know if down the road, if they would try to use him in their trial. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think they should have any contact with him until all of their like legal stuff for their crime, until all of that has been resolved. All of their appeals, everything has been resolved. Because Ethan, in his statement, because I played that, I think in the Who Is Responsible video, I played, he said that he and he alone was the one who was responsible. He said that he was hiding his true intentions and his true thoughts. He said all those things, but to me, I think he was letting things leak out. I think he was showing that there was something there. Dominique, I agree with you. I am concerned if that is what's best for Ethan. I know that's what the parents want, but I don't know if that's what's best for Ethan. And I think if he is in therapy, I think that should be up to his treatment team. If he does have a psychiatrist, I think that should be up to them. It might negatively impact his mental health finding out that his parents are going to be incarcerated for at least the next 8 years. So that 10 to 15 years, that means the minimum they'll serve is 10, but they've already been incarcerated for 8. So they'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. I might have said that wrong. They've already done 2 years, so they have to serve 8 years. I hope I said that right. But yes. And so I don't put anything past them, and I don't know that their desire to reach out to him, I don't know if it's for him. Or is it for them to feel better? Or I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So I agree. I don't know that that is what is in his best interest. And how old is he now? Is he like 17 now? How old is he? Um so back in December, how old? Uh, 'Cause I thought he was, like, 15 or something when everything happened. Um, let me see. Let me see. I don't have he was born in 2006. So, me and math in my head. So, he was 15 years old when it happened. So, that was in 2001. Um, okay. So, can somebody do the math? I can't do that. 'Cause it's 2004, so I think he might be 18? He might be 18 now? No, I don't know. I don't know. 2006, 2024. Nope, I did times and not minus. There we go. Yeah, so he looks like he'll be turning 18 this year. Once he's a legal adult, that might make a difference. So yeah, he's 17, 18 this year. Um, welcome, welcome. I truly appreciate all of y'all's support. This was a long one, but I'm glad that we got through it all. Thank you to everyone that watched. If you're not subscribed, make sure, and if you like this type of content, feel free to support. I am not going to be doing a video this Saturday or next Saturday. So this week it's just Tuesday, depending on what happens. So we know him. Who is it? Ooh, Daybell. Chad Daybell, his trial starts. They have a jury. I will definitely be covering that one. It's supposed to be like 6 to 8 weeks. He is facing the death penalty, and so I will definitely be looking at that case. If there's something that comes up that I want to talk about, I'll probably either do a pop-up live or I'll record it and release it later. But so stay tuned for that. Once again, I appreciate you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.